Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining. We were just trying to get our Facebook Live details sorted out, but it doesn't look like that's going to be happening. So we'll just post this recording there after. Awesome to see how many volleyball coaches are here, lots of volleyball athletes. As we expected, most of the stuff we do right now is largely with the volleyball community. And we have such a great volleyball representative and Ben Joseph joining us. So we're definitely going to have some good volleyball chats today. Just wanted to give you guys a little bit of an overview of what it's going to look like today. First, Nick and I are going to dive into talking about what is, if practice doesn't make perfect, what really are we talking about? What is there beyond it that's going to help improve our athletes, improve performance? We'll give a little bit of the theory on some of the things that we've been doing with the Athlete Wellness Academy for a number of years, how it's been impacting athletes, how it's been impacting teams, how it's impacted us in our careers as well. And then we'll get into hearing some of the anecdotal, practical examples of what that looks like when the rubber hits the road, when we start bringing those strategies into working with a high performance team in a high volume, highly demanding season and setting. What have we seen happen? And then at the end of that, we'll open it up for any questions and answers, and we'll talk about our upcoming course, The Resilient Body, which is kind of a deep dive into some of these concepts that we've been doing with teams. And really is our goal to make it just more accessible, so more people have this option to look beyond just the grind, like we've talked about in some of our emails, beyond just training more, just getting more reps, because everyone who's here, I'm sure, just wants to get better. They want to get better themselves. They want their athletes to get better. And we'll share just a little bit of a different roadmap getting towards that. So if you have questions at any point, just throw those up in the chat, and we'd love to hear from you at any time. And hopefully have some great discussions around that. And then at the end, we'll have that dedicated question and answer time as well. So we'll start by giving a little bit of background on who we are. If you don't know the Athlete Wellness Academy, that's something that Nick and I started about 2 and a bit years ago now. It's a concept that I had been working with in my practice as a strength and conditioning coach and as a health coach for athletes for a little while, but it wasn't really until Nick came involved that we were able to get it off the ground as something bigger and aim to spread it a little bit further. So my background is in movement science, basically. I have a master's in experimental medicine, looking at how injury prevention is tied to movement patterns. And I practice as a kinesiologist and a health coach, and work on somatic movement retraining and rehabilitation. So that's where things started with me, is that desire really to prevent injuries, to deal with injuries that were coming up, and then to figure out how can we do better at reducing some of these injuries that are plaguing so many athletes, me included. I grew up as a volleyball player, and injuries took me down pretty early in my career. So it's been a super interesting journey of figuring out, looking from the movement side, we can do a lot, but really the whole impetus for the Athlete Wellness Academy was realizing that there's so many other layers that impact what shows up as physical health, what shows up as physical resiliency, physical durability. And it was pretty mind-blowing to me and pretty game-changing to me as I started to broaden my horizons. And that's one of the reasons why I'm just so passionate about sharing it now and seeing other people have those light bulb moments and those aha moments and get to make changes in their life that ultimately make them a way better athlete and a way happier, healthier person. So that's my background, and I will turn it over to Nick.
Awesome. So my background largely comes into the present as an athlete. So I played at Trinity Western University for 5 years. I played with the national team, and then I played 4 seasons of professional volleyball overseas. And throughout all that time, actually since I was 15 until my last season as a professional, I was lucky enough to work with Misha throughout my career, as a strength coach, as a health coach, as a coach, as lots of different roles. And he, throughout that whole time, loads my knowledge back then. was instilling this concept of resiliency in me. And it allowed me to kind of get to where I got to in my career, where I was able to show up kind of every day, healthy, recovered, energized, and motivated, and ready to work hard at training. It kept me pretty healthy throughout my whole career. I never really had many serious injuries that kept me out for too long. And this kind of brings me now to where I am now and why I'm excited to be talking to all of you right now. And it's just because I've kind of made this my mission now to reveal this path that is a little bit unknown to athletes. And I just want to show that there's another way of getting to accomplish your goals, creating that success for yourself, without having to necessarily just be one-minded, just be volleyball-minded, just be soccer-minded, whatever your sport is. You can have a lot of that, but then also enjoy all these other parts of your life, and have a little bit more balance. And through that balance, you get better at your sport. And that's kind of what I learned throughout my career through working with Misha. And now that is what I work with athletes on. I am a sleep coach. I'm a health and human performance coach. I work as a personal trainer. I work a lot on movement quality, similar to what Misha does. And just trying to really unlock athletes' abilities to take it to the next level, but to also get there in a sustained way where they're not just going to reach their peak and then fall off right away. So yeah, that's roughly my story so far.
Perfect. So the big question of the day, if practice doesn't make perfect, then what does? And we know that everyone here, experienced athletes, experienced coaches, you know that there are other things that contribute to what's going to show up as, we don't want to say perfection, but what's going to show up as better performance, as the fastest pathway to performance. But what we really want to illustrate is how impactful it can be when we make this perspective shift from assuming that practice is the absolute best way, going to give us the absolute best gains in the fastest possible way. When we shift the perspective to looking at it a little bit of a different way, which is what we're going to present, this different blueprint, we just want to show how impactful it can actually be. And that requires knowledge. It requires trust that that path is even there, that there is even an option. We want to start by, I'll hand it back over to Nick to talk about this one interesting study that kind of summed up things that we've been seeing for a long time.
Awesome. Yeah, so the keyboard study, this is a study done by Harvard Medical to look at the question of, does practice make perfect? So the study involved teaching people to type a sequence of keys on the computer keyboard as quickly and accurately as possible. They trained for 12 minutes and were able to become relatively good at the task. And the group that trained in the morning and then retested 12 hours later were able to improve their performance by about 2%. Then there's another group that trained in the evening and then retested 12 hours later. So this would have been, they had a good night's sleep and then they were tested. And they actually improved on average by 20% in their performance. So in addition to this, the study showed that it wasn't just like because they had sleep, it was actually associated to a specific kind of sleep that they were getting. So the better quality of non-REM sleep that they had that night, the better that they were able to perform the next day with this task. And so the result of this whole thing was practice doesn't necessarily make perfect, but practice plus rest gets you as close as you can get towards that. So this was, when I saw this, I was like, this is exactly what we talk about. This is a study that just kind of reinforces some of the things that we do. So I thought it was a really interesting study.
So when we start looking beyond practice, we look to some of these other things like rest, like sleep. For us, one of the words that we've been using a lot, and maybe seems like a kind of a buzzword out there now is resiliency or durability. It might just seem like a buzzword to us because we've been talking about it so much, but it's this concept that I think is, at least in my perception of it starting out, was not really that well understood. Durability, resiliency, I always kind of associated with just not getting injured or not having a mental breakdown under high pressure situations. But as we've started to look at it a little bit further, we realized it's more about understanding what is that state that you want to be in? What is that state physically? What is that state mentally? And how do we get there? When we know what that state is, how we get there, that's part of the picture. And then kind of what's usually understood as resiliency starts, which is how do we stay there? How do we not get knocked down when all the pressures come, when all the challenges come? But what we want to bring back and what we've seen is super important is there's this pathway of getting to that state of first uncovering what that state is for each athlete, for each team, getting there, walking that path, doing the work to establish that foundation, and then using tools, using proven strategies so that when the hardships come, when the challenges come, you don't get knocked off course as easily. We know the challenges will come. We know there will be crazy high volume in seasons. We know there will be tournament schedules that are hard for any athlete to deal with. We know that there will be stressors. We know that there will be personal relationships that come up as an additional stressor. And it's not that we can't have those and be successful. It's the opposite. It's that we want to learn how to train to be able to navigate those and still be really successful through that. There's also this concept around resiliency that sometimes people think it's just about suffering. It's just we need to go through hard times. The people who have been cut from the team, they're the ones that they make it next year because it lights the fire under them. And that hardship was what taught them. And that we've seen in practice is, in our opinion, a little bit off as well. It's just missing this piece of the equation that says hardship teaches us, when actually what we've seen is it's how we navigate the hardship. It's having tools. It's having awareness that there's something to do during that time that can actually keep you centered. It doesn't mean that we need to descend into depression, into anxiety, into despair. That's not what teaches us. But navigating and applying those tools during that challenging time can be an amazing opportunity for growth. One of my favorite examples for this, for kind of going against the concept that hardship is so great and is this great teacher, is that people can go through hardship, they can go through trauma, and when they have the tools, when they have the support network, when they have the strategies, they can emerge from it incredibly strong. But we also see that when they go through these challenges, people can emerge broken. People can emerge with addictions. People can emerge with PTSD. People can emerge with problems that last the rest of their life from this when they don't have the tools, when they don't have the strategies. And this is kind of an extreme example of it and some of the things we're talking about there. But the same thing happens with athletes all the time. I'm sure that everyone here has seen an athlete who has had a rough experience at some point. They've played for a coach who was really rough on them. They've been through a really tough season where they lost their love of the sport. And that's what pulls them away from it. And then that sport ends up having kind of this negative flavor for the rest of their life. And so when we have these tools and strategies, the likelihood of that, way lower. So we like to think of resiliency as equal parts learning how to navigate to our center and developing the skills to remain there. And that begs the question, what is our center? When we talk about this kind of vague existential concept, what is it that tells us we're in that central point, that we're really grounded in the best version of ourselves? We like to think of it as our innate state of excellence or peak performance. When we have the conditions set up, when we have the tools in place that physically, mentally, emotionally, we feel really supportive, and we're doing things that that stimulate and drive us to this spot, we see our top performance come out. We're the most creative. We're the most spontaneous. We enjoy it and just love what we're doing the most. And that's where these unbelievable performances come from. Really key to this state is that it's grounded in and connected to joy and to happiness, connection, team relationships, to curiosity, and to adventure. There's this very positive feeling around it, rather than what has been sometimes touted as kind of the way to go about being an elite athlete, of like, put my head down and grind, I'm so tough. And there's, what we've seen is that what we want out of toughness, the resiliency, can be approached in a totally different way that doesn't put a chip on your shoulder, that doesn't close you off from others, that doesn't beat up your body out of punishment in an attempt to get stronger. Another big thing we see in this state is that we're proactive. We see things coming. We are able to observe objectively and know what we need to do. And we're not just dealing with being reactive of anything that pops up in front of us. So the question is, first of all, how do we get to that state? That state that is our center, that we want to be staying in. And that comes from what Nick and I have been, what I was able to kind of learn while I was working with Nick, and then what we've been trying to help athletes do, which is redirecting attention towards prioritizing wellness as part of a training program. And I think it's easy to say that, of course, we all understand this is important. We all understand that sleep is important and nutrition is important, but we're not just talking about acknowledging it. We're talking about really bringing it to the forefront and thinking, what could happen? What would happen if we shifted our perspective to seeing this as important as all of the technical training? What might happen at that point? What type of athletes would be creating? What type of personal experience would we have as an athlete if we could create that? If we were able to create a state where we were happy, where we were healthy, where we were energized, where we were motivated, independent of what was happening in our season, independent of what was happening with our sport. If we weren't afraid to fail at anything, if we weren't afraid of what our body might break down in, what could we accomplish? How quickly could we change? How far could we go? And really, this process, there's not an equation of saying you need to sleep this much, you need to eat these things, you need to do these meditation practices. This is all about getting to know yourself as an athlete. This is a unique blueprint for each person. And that's really what makes it so exciting and so fun to coach, is that the answers are there, they're within. We just need to learn how to ask those questions. And we need to value asking those questions enough to take time and ask them. When we get to that spot, how do we remain there? If we can get ourselves feeling really peaceful, feeling really excited about the season, feeling really happy, performing really well, how do we get there when stuff starts to come up? Or how do we stay there when stuff starts to come up? And my favorite analogy for this is an analogy of the surfer versus the swimmer. If we think of it as the waves that come in a storm as being the challenges, the hardships that come, if we don't know they're coming and we're hanging out in the ocean and swimming and they start to roll in, they're going to knock us under. They're going to twist and turn us about. It's not going to be a pleasant experience. If, however, we know that's coming, we prepare for it, we bring a surfboard with us, so we get to leverage some of these tools that we can develop. Now those waves start coming and we get a little grin on our face. We realize, yeah, I knew this was going to come and I know how to get through this. In fact, I can't wait to navigate this because it's going to be fun and I'm going to learn some things. And that's pretty much, in my mind, the clearest analogy of what these tools that we teach help you help you do throughout a season. Another key aspect of staying there is developing this relationship with your body and with your mind and just with yourself in general. That's a partnership and not a dictatorship. That you start to open up that conversation that comes from getting to know yourself a little bit more, to understanding what really makes you feel good, what maybe you need to let go of, understanding the difference between pleasing others, doing something because you think it should be done, and what's really that drive from within. What is the call from your center? What is it to do physically? What is it to do mentally? What is it to do emotionally? As you open up that conversation, you get a lot in response. Your body ends up staying way more balanced. Your mind ends up staying way more balanced, but only when we know how to work with that. In opposition to that is the dictatorship. This is, my body is a machine. I need it to do what I want it to do, when I want it to do it. I will force it to do this. I will tape it up as much as I need to. I will suffer through it. It can recover later. As you can expect, when we engage in that type of relationship with our body or with our mind, then we get some kickback. We get higher levels of stress. We get higher levels of physical breakdown. And eventually the body says no, or the mind says no. Something will stop us from continuing on that path. So what we're looking at in this concept of prioritizing wellness is taking a graph like this that shows throughout a season, if you're starting at this certain level of stress, one way of looking at when we prioritize wellness and resiliency, everything we're going to be doing wellness-wise is going to reduce stress. And this you could think of as kind of the negative aspect of stress. You could also think of workout as stress, and that's a good type of stress, but this is unwanted, unnecessary, chronic stress. So as we reduce this through nutrition, as we reduce this through mental training and taking care of our mindset, as we reduce this through really deliberate rest, recovery, sleep strategies, as we reduce this through opening up movement patterns in our body and getting rid of tension there, we can move this whole point lower. So instead of with a training load increase, we exceed this stress threshold, which is where we might see injuries show up, where we might see exhaustion show up, where we've exceeded the resources of what our body can handle. Instead of moving above it, we might see that we could start the whole season with a much stronger foundation of wellness, with a lower level of stress, so that even when this increased training load comes, we're still okay. We're still under this threshold. We're not breaking down. We feel for sure that there's load, that there's challenge, but we've got our surfboard, we're just riding it. We can see that even when it comes to these intense moments, these tournaments, these provincial, these national championships, these world championships, that if we have a really strong foundation going into it, we can handle a lot. So that's the theory of resiliency. That's how we've viewed it. That's how we've seen it work. That's how we approach it. But the theory is one very small part of it. And what's way more interesting and way more fun to hear about is what happens when it's applied. So we've got the opportunity to hear, we'll have the opportunity tonight to hear from Ben Josephson, and I'll turn it over to Nick and him in a second. And we'll also get to hear from an athlete that I've worked with pretty much as long as I've worked with Nick, Sarah Pantovich, who's had a really unique journey through sport and through wellness herself. And we'll get to hear kind of two different perspectives on what happens when we shift that perspective, when we see the importance of wellness and resiliency as an option. So Nick and Ben, over to you guys.
Awesome. So just before we introduce Ben and get started with a bit of Q&A with Ben, I just want to give a quick or a brief kind of background of what we've been doing with the Spartans over the last few seasons. So we've been taking a bit of a 4-quadrant approach to working with them, which means that we've been working with them through their movement quality, through their nutrition, through their recovery, and through their mindset. And with all that, so with the movement, we've been helping design and implement their preparation routines so we can get their bodies primed for training. But then also in the mindset part, we've also been working on the preparation so we can get their minds ready for training and for games as well. We've been working on their physical durability alongside their awesome head trainer and athletic therapist so that we can improve on how well the athletes move so that they could mitigate the risk of injury, reduce their pain, and just have more availability of athletic movements. We work towards enhancing their awareness of their habits. So that whole big awareness piece that Misha talked about before, making them very aware of what they were doing off the court and how that could impact them on the court, and then giving them the tools and assisting them in the implementation of those tools so that they could implement some sleep strategies or implement a little bit different nutrition strategies than they were used to so that they could ultimately work towards a little bit higher performance or a little bit greater resiliency from it. And this whole process couldn't have been accomplished with this team if it wasn't for Ben being so open-minded and bringing us in. It's crucial to have a coach that buys into it and leads their team into this unique way of approaching sport. And Ben is that coach. And not only did he bring us in to work with the team, but he made us feel extremely valued and a part of the team's success, which speaks to his incredible character as a coach. And just, well, most of you know Ben, but for those who don't, Ben's been the head coach at Trinity Western University for 13 seasons. He's a women's national team assistant coach, and he has 6 national championship rings, 5 as a head coach. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
So tonight with Ben, I'm just going to ask him a couple of questions and kind of see how this process has gone for his team. So Ben, what was the moment when resiliency started becoming more important to you and your program?
Well, I think the biggest moment that kind of shifted and solidified in my mind that how important this movement and this resiliency mindset is the 2018 season. So we had worked with Misha periodically before that, and I think we saw some success and we saw some things get better, and we had some team success and health, and I thought we were playing well. And then it almost got to the point like, all right, we got this. You know, we figured out what we need to know, and it was almost this 2018. It was like this Band-Aid. We kept trying to put Band-Aids on problems, and we were just good enough to get far enough along. We actually made the national tournament, the national final, and at that point, the Band-Aids all came off, and it was just wow. We just looked back, and we've been basically in survival mode for about 8 weeks. Since the first weekend of February. It was just trying to survive. And when we look back and try to figure out, you know, was it just one game? And we decided, I don't think it was. I think it was about 2 months of where if we'd have done a better job of preparing the team, of working on, again, balance and wellness and resiliency, and not just volleyball, we're good enough. We can get through this. And, the team was good enough to get there, but I think that was what it really became eye-opening, that we had failed the team in giving them the tools they needed to stay in the center, as you said in the beginning part. And then since that moment, we hired Athlete Wellness the very next season, and the last 2 seasons after the final, we won in 19. The guys after the game, after 18 final, they were broken and battered and sick, and we had guys who had to get back surgery following the season. Guys are out with strep throat. Other guys are out for the season. It was just a mess of a team. Where after we won in 19, after working with you, Nick, for the season, the guys after the game was like, who are we playing tomorrow? Let's play again. Like, who we got next weekend? It was just a completely different. And that chart you shared, Misha, I thought was so accurate. As we were able, through the work we did, we're able to lower our threshold, so much that when the stress of the national tournament came, the guys were resilient. They were energetic, and honestly, they wanted to play the next night instead of limping down the stretch. We were getting better down the stretch. And talk about the difference between 2 seasons. And I mean, maybe the guys learned a lot from 2018, maybe, but I think one of the biggest things we learned is volleyball at that level is not going to make the difference. The difference is going to be made in the previous 6 months of work in the weight room, in the nutrition room, the recovery room, upgrading our prehab routines, our post-game routines, and most importantly, probably the nutrition and the sleep were probably the two biggest kind of things that the team upgraded to really, again, be able to play in their center more often. I think that was probably right there. And then the same thing, we went through it again this year, and we were heading into the national tournament. We had the best week of practice of our season heading into the national tournament this year. Unfortunately, the tournament was canceled, as we all know, but I think it was 2 seasons in a row where the team was playing its best ball in the last 3 weeks of the year. And as a coach, I mean, isn't that the dream for all of us? And as an athlete, that we're playing our best ball when the moment's the biggest. And it's an inexact science. And I clearly don't have the magic formula. But what I do know is when we've balanced the group's overall health and prioritized volleyball equally is when we've had our most success and when our athletes were able to perform their best.
Also, that's awesome. What's something that you've noticed the athletes or the team kind of doing a little bit differently than, let's say, than 2018 or before?
And one of the things I loved about both Misha and Nick, you guys have done a great job of framing it in a way that a 19 to 22-year-old medium disciplined focused athlete can digest, is that it's just the constant message is, can you just make a little bit better choice this time? So, you don't need to go to bed at 10 o'clock every night, but is there a way to go to bed 30 minutes earlier? Is there a way to upgrade your bedtime routine just a little bit more? Can you, instead of having the white bread, can you have the multigrain bread? Like, it's not these whole scale lifestyle changes that make the biggest difference. It's just, aggregation of multiple marginal gains is the phrase we use in coaching all the time. And it's a business concept, but really that's what you guys are talking about is, can you just stack good decision after good decision, just little bit by little bit, and then you start seeing whole scale changes over time. And I think that's something that athletes, especially, younger amateur athletes, can do. We're not asking these athletes to go and compete for Olympic Games. We're just asking these athletes to just, again, take one step closer to the center. And then can you just stay there a little bit longer than the other team? And that's where, you could be a little bit more successful than them. And then winning produces motivation to do better. And the more athletes have success, the more they want to sustain it. And they realize, going to bed a little earlier, I felt better today at practice. I'm going to do that again. And I'm going to upgrade my routine. And you know what? I'm going to have a better breakfast than I did yesterday. And then all of a sudden it starts to get these positive spirals, instead of what I saw in 2018 was this massive negative spiral of just medium decision after medium, not bad decisions, just medium, instead of positive, just little positive stacks. And I think that's probably my favorite overall lesson. And then, you don't have to become this workout beast. You don't got to be this great sleeper out of the gate. Can you just be a little bit better this week than you were last week? And that stacks up. And I think we as coaches and athletes all understand that concept.
I love that. I love the whole habit stacking approach. It's just, small incremental changes over time.
I learned it from you guys, man.
I guess you kind of mentioned a few, but what have been the results since this shift in your team's approach?
Yeah, I think it was neat. I had a really cool conversation with Marv Dunphy last week. And for those who know who Marv is, he was the Olympic gold medalist coach for USA in 1888, Hall of Fame coach at Pepperdine. And I had the question came up that, what's the common thread between all the greats that he's coached? So he was Karch's coach of the Olympic Games. So the greatest volleyball player ever to live, this was his coach. And you know what he said is the greatest players were the ones who didn't do anything to limit their chances of winning. And I think that way of saying it was super interesting. It's as he unpacks it, he talked about the things that we've been talking about on this conversation so far. As they slept well, they recovered after practice, they ate the right things, they prepared before practice, they stayed later, they studied more film, they balanced their volleyball in their life properly. Like, they didn't do anything to limit their chance of winning. And when he flipped the question on me, as all these American coaches love to flip the question back on you. And he's like, well, what about you? And I thought, it's really similar. For me, it was the athletes who can maintain the highest work rate have been my best athletes. And actually, like, Nick, you're one of those athletes. Adam Schreimer's on this call. He's another one. And I think this season I watched Eric Lepke live through it. Now Eric's been working with you guys for a couple seasons now, and Eric Lepke is probably the best player I've ever coached. Unfortunately, sorry, Adam and Nick, but he's displaced you guys, and that's the GOAT role as a Spartan. But what I saw from Nick from Eric is that thing that Marv talks about. He didn't do anything to limit his chance of winning, and Eric had to win the Player of the Year this year, and he had to win the national championship to have any type of success. Like, that's the stakes that he was dealing with. And instead of that being stressful for him, what he did is he was just step by step, made good decision after good decision. He upgraded his eating, he upgraded his mobility. He did a bunch of work on his knees and his back, and all of a sudden he had the healthiest season of his career, and he had the best season of his career, and he ended up being the Player of the Year. And and his goal was to every day be the best player in and out of the gym. And I thought that was neat, because Nick, the story goes with Nick is in Delp's 5th year, we met and I asked you what would be success for you? How did you want to lead the team? And Nick took a week. He said, I'll come back to you next week. And classic Nick, he thought about it and probably made notes and, pro con lists. And when we met the final week, Nick said, he looked me in the eye and I got all intense. And he said, I'm going to be the best player in every gym we're in this year. And I'm like, whoa, like that's deep, and in that year, Nick was the Player of the Year and led us to the national final. And, that ability to be the best player every single day in the weight room, in the training room, in the game gym, I think that's kind of what this was. And then we told that story to Eric. And what I saw Eric this year is he took it to another level. And this is built on what you guys have kind of educated us and him with, is it wasn't just the best player in every gym. He said he wanted to be the best player in everywhere. So in the recovery room, he wanted to be the best player in this bed. He wanted to be the best player in the food hall. Like, he took that kind of mindset of, I want to be the best player in every context or every gym, like you mentioned, Nick, and he took it to another level and talking about balance and try to be an elite performer in every decision he made. And I think we watched Eric live through one of the best single seasons that I've experienced. And I think it was a really great example of when, individual talent meets, that desire to not, what did Marv say? Don't limit yourself. Don't do anything that might limit yourself from winning. I think that kind of blend was something really special this year from Eric. And I think that's a living example of kind of what we're talking about here today.
That is such a cool way to put it. And yeah, Eric is a living embodiment of that. I love that. Just closing out here, Ben, any other comments that you have on durability, resiliency?
Oh man, I mean, we could go on and on and on and on about all this stuff, but I think the biggest rocks that hit home the hardest with our athletes, and when I look around, we got a lot of college age coaches and athletes here, is sleep and eating was the hardest thing. I mean, they're student athletes, and they want to stay up late and hang out with their friends and cramming tests and writing papers till the wee hours of the morning. And I think that was just such a huge lesson to get hammered into their heads is, okay, great. Can you just can you just get to bed an hour earlier? Can you choose to get up earlier? That shift, instead of staying up all late, get up earlier. And just how our brains are more functional and creative in the mornings than they are in the evenings. And I think that was a big one. And then just making, when we're out at Boston Pizza for a pregame meal, one, you've convinced us not to go to Boston Pizza anymore. So yes, but two, if we have to go there, even if you have to go to McDonald's, like I love this, like you empowered them. Like, if you have to go to McDonald's, can you make a better choice there? And just that concept of there's good choices to be made. And we talk about this as coaches all the time, but we're talking about, do you cheat on the test or not, or do you skip weights or not? I mean, you're talking about a little decision. Don't have a Big Mac, have the wrap. Don't get the big Coke, get a water. These are just simple decisions that athletes can make. And like I said at the beginning, I think that's a huge one. And then I really love the stuff that, the warm-up protocols that you guys taught us and put in place. The 4-minute magic is absolute magic. The ability to, everybody can find 4 minutes to get your body a little bit more mobile before practice. And then when you feel better at practice, then that ability to recover after. So here's the anecdote. We win the Canada West final this year. And the way it worked, we ended up finishing that game around 12:30 in the morning. And so we're done the match. We're playing the final points after midnight. Like, this is not high performance stuff here. And then, so we go up into the room, and the team is, they're fired up, but we're leaving. And I walk by and I see in the bathtub, at 2 a.m. when I'm leaving the office, there's 2 athletes still in the ice, one athlete in the ice tub, another athlete stretching. We just won the Canada West final. And those guys did not fail to recover, because that's their method. If you want to be special, you have to stay in your routine. You got to take care of the machine instead of demand the machine to care for you, right? And I love the way you put that. Don't be a dictator. Like, these were guys partnering with their bodies, taking care of themselves after. They could be out celebrating. It was a great win. We're happy about it. But instead, we weren't done. There's more to do. There was more body to recover. And I just, again, those aren't things that I taught these kids. These aren't things that I've educated them on. These are concepts that have been placed, again, small decision by small decision. And again, those are just a couple stories that have really helped our program. And I love that, we have this company that is showing, a really clever way to balance high performance with overall wellness. And it's the best thing for our program last few years, for sure.
Thanks so much, Ben. Yeah, it's always so fun talking with you. No matter what the conversation's about, I always end up learning something, coming away with something new. So I think everyone probably can say the same thing here from that conversation. Thanks so much.
Pleasure.
Misha, do you have any final thoughts with Ben here?
Yeah, just to reiterate, Nick, that thanks so much, Ben. So great to hear those concepts. A lot of that stuff is even kind of behind the scenes things that I hadn't heard about the team, and really cool to hear how it's been looking and how it's been working for you guys. And yeah, thanks again for your openness, for your willingness to be kind of the guinea pig in this, to see that there is potential there, and to step outside of what was known and what was going to be safe, and to look for a different way. It's been really cool to see you step into that role.
Well, thanks. It's been awesome, and I hope it keeps going for a long, long time. More and more people get on board. It's great.
Cool. Okay, so we want to shift it over to Sarah Pantovich. And Sarah is now doing a little bit of work with us in the Athlete Wellness Academy. And she's the only reason that we have any sort of social media stuff happening, because Nick and I are pretty hopeless on that. But she is more than just a social media wizard. And she'll actually be joining us in this Resilient Body course that we're starting up next week. We'll get to that in a minute. Because she has, in her process through being an athlete, being a student athlete, she's come up with an incredible fascination and drive and real skill set around nutrition. And not just around making delicious, beautiful, healthy meals and figuring out how to do that no matter where you are, but really understanding the psychology behind it and what does and what doesn't work for athletes to actually make some of those changes. So I'm always really excited. She's very inspiring to hear from. So over to you, Sarah. We'd love to hear about your pathway through prioritizing resiliency.
Okay, hi guys. It's gonna be really hard to follow up after Ben and you guys, because Ben, you're amazing. Well, that was amazing to listen to. You're really passionate, and so thank you so much for sharing. That was really inspiring for me. So yeah. Well, I think first of all, I played in the US for a year. So I played some volleyball there, and that was kind of there. I'm not sure how much it's changed now, because it's been like 5 years since I was there, but they really, they had that whole grind mentality, right? So I'd be in school in class from 8 a.m. till noon. And then after that, we would go do weights and cardio and sand sprints. And then after that, have a 3-hour practice. And like, there was recovery, but I think there was kind of like, there was that unsaid kind of energy that it was always about working harder, like practicing harder, gaining more muscle, practicing harder again. And then I think there was a lack of balance, and it was really easy to get caught up in that like hustle. And so I thankfully, and I credit this to Misha, I don't have any personal stories about injuries because I actually I had never had a serious injury that took me out of volleyball. Um, but for me, it was definitely more a burnout mentally and not being able to be. I think my first year like was pretty good because I was fresh, but I think later on coming out, I had to. Obviously, there was other things, but I had to take like a gap year, and when I came home and just really figure out like how am I going to push forward with my life now, feeling completely burnt out. And I think that's when I realized that there that I wouldn't be able to be fully present for my life and fully emotionally available and physically feeling well if I didn't start to prioritize things such as rest and nutrition. And because my body said no, right? My mind said no, my body said no. And that's when I started to really focus in on nutrition and sleep and recovery. And that's when I realized that the more I made those things a priority, naturally, without having to be without having to like grind harder, push harder, I became a better version of myself. And that then I was able to, and like Ben was talking about, it just becomes this positive feedback loop of it just keeps feeding itself and feeding itself, and all of a sudden you're effortlessly and sustainably at your highest level. And I think that's where the magic is I think a lot of these practice harder, grind harder is a very yo-yo kind of experience. You're at your top and then you're blasted off at the bottom, and then you're recovering and you have this injury or you're mentally burnt out, and then you're at the top again and then you fall back off. So I think resiliency almost, and like this path that they're taking is like, it might appear like what do you mean I need to rest? Like I could be using that rest to get better. But I think it's like up here and it's consistently getting better and then staying there throughout your entire career rather than yo-yoing and losing all this time recovering and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of my personal experience with it, is that it is the ultimate pathway, and it is the most sustainable one, and the one that will get you where you want to be. So yeah.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Sarah. So we're coming close to the end of our hour here. So we want to talk about this resilient body course that we have coming up. If I can make this screen share all happen and look a little bit less crazy. So this has been something that Nick and I got to put together, Nick and Sarah and I, because we've had a summer like everyone else has had of a very different routine, of a lot of times to think about what's going to be really useful in this upcoming season. Every season we work with hundreds and hundreds of athletes, and usually that is doing the type of stuff that we've done with Ben's team, of getting them in there and helping them navigate through a season. This upcoming fall is looking like it's going to be a little bit different. And actually, to us, it's kind of one of the coolest opportunities that we've seen in a long time. Very rarely, as a high school or a collegiate athlete, do we see this amount of time off of competition, which means there is time to be creative. There's time to be flexible with what's happening in the season, with what you're prioritizing, with what you're doing. There's no better time to embrace this growth mindset of being able to change what you're focusing on and try something new, take a little bit of a risk, and see if you can build a stronger foundation. If we go back to that last slide, could you get to this point where you could be here when your season starts? And I think that in talking with a lot of coaches, people are starting to realize that what's going to get them there, what's going to be the most payoff for what they can do in this time away from competition, is they're not going to make these crazy volleyball gains because there's no competition to make them with it. For sure, you can make them in some of the training and some of the practicing that you're doing, but teams are going to need an edge somewhere. Athletes are going to need an edge somewhere, and they're going to need to be able to rebound back into their season with a much stronger foundation than just regularly, because everyone will have gone through this and everyone will be more rested. So it'll be the people who have really created this strength of staying in the center that we think are going to have a lot of success when volleyball, when sports get up, back and running, when competitions get going again. So what the Resilient Body looks like is weekly Zoom coaching and practical sessions. This won't just be talking about how important sleep is, talking about how important nutrition is. What we really want to do this is coach athletes through the exact steps that they can take. It'll be very interactive, very introspective. And then as we get through some different aspects of it, all the practical sessions will be around movement, will be around breath, will be around mental exercises and guided meditations, visualizations. So there's going to be a lot to be done so that we don't make it just another hour in front of Zoom, because that's the other thing we're pretty sensitive to, is everyone is getting a lot of that right now. So we've made this as practical as possible to give them an opportunity to actually feel and experience some of these things themselves. There's 4 phases that we're going to go through in this.
So stress is a big part of this, and if we can mitigate or at least get better at stress management, then we can recover better and show up better the next day. So who is this for? It's for athletes with a drive towards mastery in their sport, who see untapped potential. It's for coaches who want the direct experience for themselves, so that they can then better experience it, so that they can apply it with their teams or athletes later. And it's for teams that recognize that this unique time is an opportunity to build an unshakable foundation. So essentially, it's for those that see this as an opportunity, see this unique season, this unique year as an opportunity to get better. And whether they're an athlete or a coach, if they have that mindset, this is something that will help them get there. So that's who it's for. So it starts the 23rd, runs till the 9th, weekly Zoom calls, 67 Pacific time. And our way of saying thanks to all of you who joined in on this call is giving you guys a discount code for 20% off. The discount code is called Beyond Practice. Sarah will actually post a link in the chat so that you guys can click straight through if you want to just copy the link for later. The code is only available for 48 hours. So once the 48 hours is up, so on Friday evening, the code is going to be canceled. So yeah, try to sign up before that happens. If you are interested, it's $60 off. And the other thing with that is, the other thing is, if you are a coach and you're working with teams and you are interested in getting your full team involved, please let us know, and we can actually give you a little bit further of a discount on that, depending on how many athletes you have. So it's the course on a specific night. Yep, Wednesday nights. Misha, you're back in here. Awesome.
I'm back. Over for me.
Okay, great.
Having a bit of a dictatorship with my computer and asking it to do too much because it just up and quit on me.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else there, Misha?
No, that's great. A big thank you to everyone who was here. We'll open it up now to any questions for Nick, for Sarah, or for Ben. Anything about the course or anything about what we talked about tonight, we'd love to chat with you guys. You can feel free to either type something up in the chat if you want to ask that way, or open up your microphone and come off mute.
I got a question.
Adam.
So I got 2. First one, Ben. What was the difference for 2018 and 2019 when Jesse, who had the back injury before the Canada West final, called the guys in or talked to the guys and said, hey, if we win the game, we need to make sure we recover? And just kind of the difference between that.
Yeah, that's a cool story. So, I mean, in 2018, Jesse was one of the guys we were band-aiding. I mean, we were just trying to get him through the season, and freshman player, really body just hurting. And after we won the Can West final in 2018, the team was fired up. And when I left the office, there was nobody in the cold tub. There was nobody stretching out and taking care of the machine. They were all out celebrating like most teams would. And, one of the phrases we love to use is, how do we be uncommon? The common athlete celebrates the wins. The uncommon athlete prepares for the next one. And, and that is an uncommon action to, like what we saw from Mashenko, the next year, is to recover after the championship game to make sure that they're ready to play again. And Jesse's back gave out on him, and he ended up having back surgery, part of it. Now, he probably needed it before that game, but the reality is instead of recovering after that game, that team went out and had a good time and enjoyed the championship. And then they paid a price for it the next weekend. But then since then, yeah, I think the next lesson, like I said, is 2 a.m, guys are still recovering and trying to prepare for the next weekend's games instead of celebrating a championship. And I think that's the difference between, again, a growth-minded player and somebody who stays invested in being special and uncommon versus, somebody who's just happy with the result.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Ben. I'll address a couple other questions in the chat here. Thanks, Adam, for the question. First of all, I think I forgot to put on this slide that it's on Wednesdays. Wednesday nights, September 23rd to December 9th from 6 to 7. We mentioned meditation. Do we do anything specific for meditation? And this course being focused around the resilient body, our primary use of meditation will be to 2 things. First of all, it's a really good way for introspection, for creating a little bit more quiet within the mind so that we can tap into that guidance that's coming from center. When we're caught up in how busy everything is, when how fast our mind is rushing from going thing to thing, it's really difficult to actually get a sense of what our body truly needs, what our mind truly wants, and to feel what that innate state is calling for. So that's one way that we'll use it. And the other way is around nervous system regulation. When we get into that aspect of recovery, that's really all about the physiology of hitting the parasympathetic nervous system, of getting into this true relax, rebuild, digest, regenerate side of the nervous system. And meditation and visualization is an incredibly powerful way to do that and to make that jump into that state as quickly as possible. We have a whole other course that's going to start in January called The Resilient Mind. And that's where we'll look at much deeper levels of the meditation aspect, and we'll look at centering meditation and analytical meditation and really uncovering and dismantling what causes stress and what leads to poor decisions. But that, with more of the mental focus, will be something we cover in January. James, let me know if you have more questions about that or if that helped. Rhonda, the amount of people we have in the course, we will probably cap it around 50 if that's how it ends up looking. But for right now, we'll see if it gets up to that. If it does get up that big, then we'll be doing a lot more kind of breakout room, small group things, because the communication and the discussion around this is what we found to be the most useful. And will the assessments be reviewed individually with the athletes? The assessments that we're going to do are going to be guiding the athletes through a self-assessment of them actually figuring out where they're at. And we'll do that on all of the fronts that we've talked about: the movement, the nutrition, the sleep, the recovery, the mindset, all the things that are going to impact how resilient their body is. And that will be kind of our beginning process of just letting them see, where do I need to work the most? Where's the lowest hanging fruit? Where am I going to get the biggest bang for my buck? And if I only have so much time, so much energy, what are the things that I really, really want to do well? And what are the things that I'm maybe already doing pretty well at? If you're already super flexible, if you're moving already really well, you're not going to be served by being in a 12-week course on mobility. It's probably going to have some diminishing returns for you. But if right off the bat they can figure out where they need the most work, then we can all direct our attention there. James, great question. Appropriate for a 14-year-old athlete. That's probably right on the cusp. We've done this work with a lot of athletes that age, and it's probably, what would you say, Nick, 50-50, whether they really get it. And I mean, you were 15 when I started working with you, Sarah, you were 12, 13, something like that. So sometimes the athletes get it right away when they are kind of mature enough and ready for it and really interested in these topics themselves, and it can be amazing. And sometimes that's a little bit early. Sometimes they're just figuring out some other things. This hasn't really entered their mind as something that they're really interested in yet, and that becomes then a harder thing to navigate. So I'd be happy to chat about who that athlete is and see on a case-by-case basis if we think that would be useful. Generally, this is probably best received by athletes in grade 10 to 12 who are on that high performance level and collegiate athletes. All throughout that range, we'll see different levels of ability to apply these. And that's when we typically see that drive really come forward, where they're already doing a lot of training, they've seen some success, and they're hungry for that next level.
Yeah, I just want to say about like the 14-year-old athlete, I think it always is a good idea to have a conversation with the kid, because I think that because I started so young, and I know Darby's on the chat here, she and I talk about this really often, and because we've been working with Misha since we were so young, we've grown up with this different filter, and we just know, we know how to take care of our bodies, we know how to prioritize things. So I think, like, speaking from like personal experience, starting with Misha ever since I was young was like the best decision. It like really created a good unshakable foundation. But I've also, because I coach young athletes as well, I've also seen athletes who I think it would be better to wait a little bit, because I think it might almost just a bit, yeah, like Misha said, too soon, and just kind of almost create some kind of resistance for them. So yeah, I think it really does depend on the athlete, but I was like a little geek since I was 12, so it worked out for me.
One more question here from Rhonda. Is there a condensed course that a team could do that would supplement our current health team? Rhonda, for current health team, who is involved in that? I mean, like athletic trainers and strength and conditioning coaches, and sports psychologists.
Yeah, we've got a strength and conditioning coach who's very much, I think, like-minded like you in terms of movement patterns, breath work, etc. But we only have a part-time or like very part-time nutritionalist, and we don't have a sports psychologist. So I typically do most of that. So just something that it's not like my voice, or that we can have like a supplemental, because that time period is like right during our practice time. So we wouldn't, like, I wouldn't be able to have my team or myself join that Wednesday night at that time, but it could be something I'd be interested in doing at a different time, and or I don't know, sorting something out if it is a good supplement to what we already have.
Definitely. We should probably just touch base after, because that's what we do with a lot of teams, is customize it based on what they already have. We don't want to be repeating a message or in conflict with a message. So it sounds like you've already got a good foundation set up there. And we could definitely look at customizing something and also making it a time that works for you. So let's follow up after this. And yeah, thanks for your questions. James, another question: is it possible to record the sessions so your daughter could review it all later? What we're doing with this course is not offering it as a recording right off the bat. And the reason is we've been doing small courses like this all summer, and we've seen a big difference in when people are there in person. We can get a much deeper coaching experience out of it, which is really what we want out of this. We don't want to just share information and give them a list of things to do. Everyone has enough of those. But when we can interact with them and put them in small groups and discuss some topics, then we get just a lot better results out of it. We are going to have, for people who can't attend this because the timing won't work for everyone, the investment might not work for everyone, we're going to have something we're launching in about the next 2 weeks that will be a placeholder for exactly what you're talking about there, James. It will be access to this content in a way that athletes can kind of select and pick and choose what they want to be doing. It will be more centered around having access to some of those tools, and then we'll have kind of a different format for how we do some of the coaching with those groups. So you're all on our email list now if you signed up for this and said you want to keep hearing from us. So we'll be announcing that in about 2 weeks once we get things up and rolling with the Resilient Body. We just need a little bit of time to get that all sorted. We probably have time for maybe one last question if anyone has a burning one before we sign off for the evening, and we'll let you all get on with the rest of your night. Okay, or if not, then again, we'll just express a huge thank you from me for being here, for being part of this, being such an awesome audience to speak to. A big thank you to Nick and Sarah for making this happen, and for Ben coming on and sharing all of your wisdom, sharing your experience. Always such a pleasure. And for everyone who asked questions, so wonderful to hear your insights, hear what you're thinking about. And please, if you had questions but didn't get a chance to ask them, or they come up later on, shoot us an email, hi@athletewellnessacademy.com. You can get us on Facebook, you can get us on Instagram. Please reach out if this was something that hit home for you, even if it takes a little while to digest and the Resilient Body doesn't work for you. We would love to be able to keep spreading this message and see people, see athletes, see coaches go through the process that Sarah's gone through, go through the process that Ben's gone through. That's what puts the big smile on our face at the end of the day. Nick, Sarah, I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thank you everyone so much for joining. This was lots of fun for us to prepare for. So big thanks to Ben for being so open, and Sarah for being so open and honest with you guys' experiences. And thanks just everyone for attending and being involved with this and asking amazing questions. And we're hoping to grow this community and stay in touch with all of you, because this is fun for us and we love doing this stuff. So thanks again.
And
yeah, big thanks for me too.
We'll send out the email with the replay, as well as a reminder on that promo code, so that if it works for you, that within 48 hours, you can save a little bit of money, and we would love to see you in the Resilient Body course. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Thanks for coming.